In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello and welcome to The Paddock and the Pavilion. I hope you are all enjoying a relaxing weekend, and I know today's episode will be one to savour. Today you are all in for a treat. Returning to the podcast, we have Richard Pitman, a broadcasting legend for nearly half a century. Whether you're relaxing in your favourite chair, walking the dog or doing jobs around the house, you are set for 50 minutes of racing insight and fun. Richard even had time to give us a horse to look out for. Enjoy today's podcast. Hello Richard, welcome back to the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Yes, a lovely place to be during this time.
Well, how are you keeping?
Yeah, great, really good. Haven't ridden for a little while because the ground's been too slippy and too hard, but that'll come very shortly.
And you've had your jab and you've had another birthday.
Yes. And I've had another Valentine's Day, even more important.
Oh, did you get lots of cards?
Oh, haven't finished opening them yet.
Well, on today's podcast, we're going to talk about your broadcasting career, which started back in 1975. Were you sad to leave the weighing room on that last day at Stratford? Oh,
yes, but you know, that was the last day of my job. I was on to a new job. I was excited for the new job. So, yes, that's the one thing you miss, not being able to go back in there. Only jockeys who are riding up to an hour. You can go in an hour before racing starts, and then they clear the room. Even trainers can't go into the jockeys' changing room. The valets, officials, and jockeys. But it's a place where you've broken bones with people. You've helped each other. You've had controversies. So, you know, for 15 years, it's a big change.
Yeah, so like all sports, we all miss the camaraderie of the dressing room, the weighing room.
Yeah.
But how did you get the job in the first place?
Well, I was very talkative when I was riding. And although it took me a long time to sort of get noticed and get riding winners, in 7 years, I'd only ridden 22 winners. That's pathetic. In 4 years, none. So, but once I got going, they couldn't stop me talking. You know, if ever they were short on, it was ITV in those days, they'd grab me and we'd talk away for ages. So I'd been approached. David Coleman always claims that he had put me forward. Julian Wilson claims it was his decision, probably was. And they'd asked me 2 years before if I'd join them as paddock commentator, because Jimmy Lindley was doing it, but didn't want to do the winter. You know, he'd like to go shooting, go to Hong Kong, go do all sorts of things. So I turned it down. I had the 5 best horses in the country to ride, because I was riding Bueller at the time. I only rode him for one season. So the job was there, but I wouldn't give up the horses for anything. And then 2 years later, when they offered me the job again, things had changed. John Frankham, who was a boy below me, had come up and was a man now, 10 years younger, patently better. And they offered it to me again. Would it come if I turned it down this time? No. Dead men's shoes. I mean, I held it for 35 years.
Yeah, so when you started, did the jockeys accept you when you started going into the paddock?
Yeah. I was mates with everyone. I can't think of one that there was no animosity. You know, you'd have your ups and downs with people over coming up the inner or giving me light or rubbing you against the rail and that sort of thing. But no, I got on well with them. Well, I'm a personable person. I like people. No animosity whatsoever.
That's a good way to start. And did you get a lot of media training as well?
Oh, none. Absolutely nil. But that was a long time ago, you know, 1975, a long time ago. No, in fact, my first day was not long after the last day of race riding. And, you know, you get your teeth kicked out. I've actually got a bridge, nice Well, nice bridge, yeah, bridge across the gap. But at the time, I had dentures, and awful, to try and get your words specifically right on some of the horse names with your teeth wobbling around was a bit difficult. So, I'm into it straight away. The only thing you had to adjust to, and we had it in those days, Stephen, we had a lot of paddock time. They'd come to you in the paddock 10 minutes or more before a race, and we'd talk about every horse in detail. So the only thing you had to get used to is the producer talking to you in your ear while you are talking live, and not stopping to think and listen to the producer. You've got to keep going. And several times in the early days, a producer would say, "Now look, Richard, I've got a shot and I'm going to bring it up in a minute, but keep talking. Don't stop talking. Keep talking. Say what you want to say. And when I'm ready, I'll tell you." And so they'd say, look, we've got a shot of someone at the parade ring. It's Nubar Gulbenkian, the Greek shipping magnate. Talk about it. What would I know about it? But you've got to keep talking, haven't you? You've got to keep talking.
And what was it like working with the experienced broadcasters like Peter O'Sullivan and Julian Wilson when you first started?
Well, quite interesting. Julian was highly educated, slightly posh, me, stable lad, not posh. So there were a few notable differences. But Julian would have employed me as he did Jimmy and other people who would never be any danger to his position. He'd get us for our jobs, put us in little drawers and leave us there for the rest of our life, wouldn't let us out. But Peter was such a hero to go and work alongside. And in fact, I've got a lovely race card of one of the last days he commentated, and all his colours filled in with his notes, which were fascinating. But on the other side of this cardboard thing were pasted on two more smaller races, 8-runner field. And by the side of lots of horses down that part of the page were his bets. Tremendous. He must certainly, normal punters wouldn't get on the bets he can get on now, I can assure you. But of course, I suppose if Peter O'Sullivan was having a bet to any bookmaker, it was a come and join me, wasn't it? He wasn't wasting his money. So, anyway, the way he invited me in and said, "Look, Richard, it's pretty easy, just talk to the camera when you're on camera as if it's your best friend, not a camera," which was good. But I also said, "Well, what about delivery, Peter?" He said, "Well, Richard, keep talking. That's all I can say. Even if it's rubbish, like when you're a jockey, but keep talking."
But some of your greatest days working for the BBC must have been at the Grand National at Aintree, and you even rode there again.
Again? What do you mean?
You went round the course again, didn't you, for the BBC?
Oh, yeah, after the racing. Well, I was fit and I could ride, and I'd got I hadn't lost my nerve, which happens to a lot of jump jockeys. When you get a certain age and you have breakages galore, you don't fancy it anymore. But I loved it. Some super things. Harvey Smith had already done one, the show jumper, along with Pat McCarran, who'd ridden the Grand National winner. And McCarran's horse refused at the third, and a big ditch. And remember, we're following this with a camera car, and they're wired up for microphones. And it refused. So Harvey Smith said, "Here, give it to me, lad." And he swapped horses. And they went herring down to Beecher's Brook, and the horse that refused at the ditch actually fell, this time with a different jockey, with with Harvey Smith, who broke a collarbone. And so all the people said, "Oh my God, that's the end of that." And Harvey said, "Oh, that'll be fine." He said, I'll get that seen to when I get back." He said, "Give me that horse." Got legged up and went on and completed it. So it had already been done when I started, but I had some great times. First of all, I went round with John Oaksey, just the two of us, and John, marvellous fellow, and we spoke well as we went. We described things brilliantly. Go to Beecher's, this will be fine, kick them in the belly, get them right at the off take off. Yeah, I'll be fine. And over we went. Canal turn, well, no other runners, Richard. Let's move out and cut the corner, let's bite the birch as we go round it. Fine. And we finished. And the next year, it was decided I'd go around with Mark Phillips, the Queen's son-in-law. And he rode Columbus, a grey horse, who was a 3-day eventer. Well, they loved the Aintree fences. And what I'd forgotten to tell you about Oaksey, I'll come to now. I said to Mark Phillips, Mark, we won't jump the third. It's a big open ditch, and they're 2 horses, cold. Oh, they won't like it. Well, of course, what's up with you jump jocks? What are you made? Are you wimps? And all that? So I told him the story that Oaksey wouldn't do it the year before. And we pulled up going to the ditch, walked around, backed the horses up to it, kicked them in the belly. He said, they'll never know, with good cutting in the room, cutting operating room. They'll never know. And they didn't. It looked as if we jumped it. But anyway, Mark Phillips was having none of this, and we kicked on and galloped down to the third. And only about 10 strides away, I realised the horse I was riding was Barony Fort, who had refused in the Grand National the year before. Oh, my God. And he tried to put the brakes on. I looked like an agricultural turnip shredder or something. Anyway, he tried to slithered in, and I fell off, and I'm winded. And I'm lying there, my face in the earth, going, oh, you can't talk, you can't breathe. And Oaksey was covering it for the Telegraph. And he came along and he turned me over with the toe of his shoe, as aristocracy would do, and said, oh, Pitman, you're a year older, but you're no wiser. So, it was great fun. But while I'm on this, and I'll make it short, I also went round I was the first person to go around with a jockey cam, a helmet cam, and they screwed it into the side of my helmet, 6.5 pounds. Well, the obvious thing, Stephen, is 6.5 pounds on your head. You're like that.
Heavy, yeah.
And the producer shouting, sit up straight. I said, I can't, there's 6.5. Right, so anyway, get off. And they screwed some other weights on that side, so now normal. But wouldn't you think, common sense, you'd screw the thing on the top of your head? You keep it straight then. Anyway, I went round with Maureen Haggis, now daughter of Lester Piggott, but been married to William Haggis for years, and Early Fenwick, a great amateur rider, sadly no longer with us. Just the 3 of us going round, and me behind, trying to get the shots, you see. It was fantastic. It was really brilliant. And I came bursting through them up that long run-in, doing a commentary, and saying, well, I'm going to put it all right today. I can see I'm going to get there, and all this rubbish. But it worked well. It was a good half an hour program. So, yeah, lots of fun, those things.
And you were working for the BBC. You were at some very iconic sporting occasions, really. The 77 Grand National, Bob Champion's 1981 tearjerker, the Void Race, and also the bomb scare.
Yeah,
what can you tell me about some of those events?
Well, Champion is a good mate of mine, but still a hero. What he did was just amazing. Not only, for raising the money, and he's about 15 million now or something like that. But to give the confidence and courage to other cancer sufferers was a marvellous thing. But also to get back from it himself and come and ride the Grand National winner, because it was pretty serious. Started off as testicular cancer, but then went to other parts of his body, and and the treatment itself, he was taking a drug they were trying out, it was worth the risk, and he said it was the drug that nearly killed him rather than the cancer. They're so great. But wouldn't it have been a fairy story anyway if Bob's horse Aldeniti had coughed in the morning and couldn't run? 54-year-old John Thorne wins it on a horse that he owned the mother and the stallion and bred it and owned it and trained it. Fantastic story. And I can still hear O'Sullivan's voice now because it was so iconic, wasn't it? And coming up the running, it's Aldeniti. Looks as if he's going to hang on, but there's a challenger coming. It's 54-year-old John Thorne on Sparta Missile. Those sort of things just stay in your mind, forever. What
about the Void Race and the bomb scare? There, you weren't expecting those.
No, not at all. Well, the Void Race, I used to do the lead up and the paddock, and then as soon as they left the paddock, I'd hand over and Peter O'Sullivan would pick up and do the parade. And so I'd been through them all on the paddock, did a reasonable job, and loosened my tie then and sort of sat back ready for all the action to unfold. And void start, oh, bad luck, and then second void start, and producer shouted in my ear, Pitman, get off your fat backside, only slightly sharper than that, and find out what's happening. Well, we used to be over right near the road into Liverpool itself, and a little scaffolding thing with an office on top of it on scaffold planks. And I ran out, fell over because they were wet. And I always used to get winded because I'm a fat little fellow. Plonk, down I went. And we have floor managers. So the guy picked me up by his hand and is whizzing through the crowds, knocking people all over the place with me like an aeroplane in his hand, And he got me to the start, by which time the whole crowd were around Keith Brown, the then starter, wanting the news. But we're the BBC, we pay the rights, we have first call. And the floor manager knocked everyone out of the way and plonked me up on my feet and shoved me there. And I said, now, Keith, what can happen? He said, I can tell you exactly. Anything that's fallen on the first circuit, or anything that has passed the circuit marker, i.e. jump the water jump, cannot run again should we run. So good, clear guidance, we were doing a good job. To which a fist came through the camera view and didn't land, but it stopped only an inch from Keith Brown's chin. And it was John Upson, who trained the favourite, Zita's lad or son, favourite for the national. And he said, the next time I see you, it'll be in court. all mayhem. Oh, it was terrible. So anyway, I backed out. I'd done my bit. I'd got the news. And I'm walking back across the course. Producer again in, Pitman, you're not finished yet. Find a steward. So they were all in a porter cabin, 4 ladders up, a scaffold, huge, high, looking straight down the course. And at the bottom was I don't know what sort of guard, big beef eater and a feather in it and a sword. And I've got a cameraman, soundman and me. Bottom of the first ladder, he said, oh, you can't come here, son, you can't come here. Stewards are up there. I said, yes, they've asked us to go up BBC for an interview. They want to tell people what's happening. Of course, they hadn't. So up the ladders, not easy with a camera on the chap's shoulder. Got to the top, very high, and I knocked on the porter cabin door and said to, said hello or something, can you answer the door? Out came Patrick Hibbert-Foy, who was the senior stipendiary steward, little tiny chap. Yes, Pitman, what do you want? This is the stewards deliberating, talking here. It's private. I said, I know, Patrick, but we're live into Hong Kong. The world is watching us. We need to know. And he said very superciliously, there are 70,000 people here, and they need to know before any news gets out to anyone else. Goodbye, and slammed the door. I mean, it was so wrong. It was wrong. They did after that realize that it's such a big event that you have to be media savvy. And now, of course, Stephen, you see it. There are cameras everywhere, aren't they? In stalls, on jockeys, here, there, everywhere. It's fantastic, the access that they have now. But that was so funny because it had never happened. We're playing by the seat of our pants. And lots of people had tried. Roger Farrant had stood in front of the chair and put cones across it and put his arms out to stop the race. And they just thought that he was some demonstrator. So they rode over him and over the cones. I think about 9 completed that course. I'm sure. And John White, who won it on Epiosde, is a pal of mine. And I rang him only recently. I said, I will never believe you that you did not know. And he won't admit to it. But we saw them talking to each other a lot as they went round, and I'm sure they're saying, oh, should we, shouldn't we? Oh, to hell with it, let's do it, And anyway, that's in the past, but so thrilling to be involved in those sort of things.
And the bomb scare year, in fact, it was the first of about 8 or 9 times I went to the Grand National myself. But fortunately, my father didn't park in the middle of the course. I thought I'd get this in. But where did you spend the Saturday night of the bomb scare?
Well, a good point, because we've all booked out. Most of us have booked out of our hotels because we've been there since the Wednesday, couldn't wait to get home. As soon as we packed up for the National, away we went. So no hotels. But I was on air as it happened, talking about the horses, you see, and all of a sudden producer again says, Pitman, there's something happening. Talk about it. They're evacuating the Queen Mother stand, or is it the Princess Royal? Anyway, the Queen Mother, I think, isn't it? So shots of them, everyone going and being put onto the course. Now, how would I know what it was? No one knew. So I said, they're evacuating the Queen Mother stand, and I'm sure it's only a fire extinguisher. Someone's being silly. Something's gone off, We'll be back in 20 minutes. I'm sure about that. Anyway, 2.5 days later, when we went back, and I switched back to off air so I could look around and say, anyone know what's happening? No. So I carry on talking. And 2 Liverpudlian police women came into my little domain, my little hut on the scaffolding. And I switched back off from being live. And I said, excuse me, sorry, but we're on air. And they came across and lifted me by the elbows and said, you're not now, and took me out. But the BBC were brilliant, Stephen. I mean, they went back like defending a battle station. They went back to the car park owners and trainers. Des Lynam held it as long as he could, and everyone else was moved out. It was done with a military precision. But the last person that we had that they couldn't reach or didn't think of reaching was Jim McGrath, Aussie Jim, who was down at the canal between Canalturn and Beaches, up a big scaffolding in his own little box, chatting away there. And I could hear in the background from the control truck saying, Jim, keep talking. We're still here, and we'll get other pictures and talk over them when you get them. And he spoke for 24 minutes, He was absolutely brilliant. But then you asked, where did we go? Luckily, my wife, very smart, she went out and went to one of the houses locally and said, look, my husband's going to be in right old state, and we're going to have to be here for whenever it can come back on. Can you give us a room? And they said, no, sorry, we can't. But my husband's home shortly. He'll take you somewhere. Anyway, we went back to where we were staying out near the M57, and luckily there was one single bed left in the hotel, which we grabbed. But when we went back, it was odd. It was eerie, but what a great thing to put it on.
Yeah, because it was run at 5 o'clock on the Monday. We'd gone home, so we didn't see it. So
yeah. There's one silly story against myself. A lot of us could make good money on the Fridays up there, golf courses or, doing entertainment. But, golf courses, I'm not a golfer. You didn't get on until midnight because they were all drinking and telling jokes and smoking. And I, as part of my regime, I'd been doing it for 30-odd years, had a blow-up rubber female, just for one silly joke, not rude, funny. And I'd shoved her in the boot, you see. So when we went back on the Monday, they let us in. There were only 2 cars in the owners and trainers car park. One was a Range Rover. I think it was Adam Ogden, son of Sir Robert. And he'd got a Range Rover with a row of guns in the back and live ammunition. He'd obviously been shooting that morning, I suppose. I don't know. And mine. And when I went up towards mine, the bomb squad people are nudging each other, you see, and laughing. Said, "This yours?" I said, "Yeah." And they sprung the boot, and there was this blow-up rubber female still inflated like that. I mean, how embarrassing is that?
A bit like Del Boy in Only Fools and Horses there.
Yeah.
But you also went back to the festival, obviously, every year until 1995, and you saw Dawn Run win the Champion Hurdle Gold Cup and Desi's famous win. What do you remember about those days?
Oh, etched in my mind. In fact, I've got one of the few maquettes of Desert Orchid. It's meant to be quarter size, which I bought then as a Christmas present for my wife. I hope she appreciates it. And I love him. I look at him every day. But Stephen, I just really want to go back to Aintree, because our last day was 2012, and I'd given a kidney away 10 weeks before the race, and I wanted to ride in the Legends race. I was 69. I've only got one eye. That eye doesn't work. Again, being kicked in the face, both, two hoos in the face. And I wanted to do it. They'd run out of Legends, so there was room for me to join the Legends race. And it was the first race of the day, Grand National Day. It was great. Mick Kinnan, 13 times champion jockey, he was in it. Oh, and all the Grand National winning jockeys were there. It was superb. The day when I got there to get ready, the chief medical officer said, "Look, I'm not going to let you ride. You've only got one eye. You've only just recovered from your kidney. And I'm also working for the Beeb." 17 minutes after the finish of the race, I was to be in my position, ready for my first interview. It was a pretty tight schedule. Anyway, I couldn't find any boots to fit me. Eventually, I stuffed my legs into someone's boots, but there was still 3 inches of flesh out the back, so we just round black tape around it, you see. So I'm taped up before I'm going out. And it was a marvellous race. But before then, the stewards called us in and said, "Now, boys, look, eyes of the world are on you, don't go mad, play jockeys, don't play soldiers, da-di-da-di-da-di. And by the way, there is a geriatric, one-eyed person riding in the race. If he's in trouble, give him some light." And they all, led by Kinnan, said, "Oh, to hell with him. He can look after himself." There was no camaraderie then, I can show you. But I was also mic'd up. So to commentate on the way round, and Jim McGrath would drop in every now and again if he thought it was pertinent. So right from the start, I popped in a little bit behind them, and I'm saying, "Oh, up front, there's so-and-so going well, and I'd like to be on that one," and daddy. I'm talking away all the way around. And then down the back straight, they suddenly realised that I'm talking away to myself. And no one knew I was mic'd up, you see. And they must have thought I was totally mad. Anyway, it finished. It didn't do anything great. But I was 69, one eye, one kidney, only just recovered. I thought it was one of the most exciting things I'd done. It was a bit of self-gratification, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, things move on. Sorry, you asked about Cheltenham. Yeah.
Yeah, what it was like to go back to the festival in a different role.
Yeah. To add to that, I was born at Cheltenham, and only barely 3/4 of a mile, not even that, I'd say, from the course, and used to play truant and go over the railway, which was live at the time, sit at the top of the hill and munch my sandwiches and see the action. It was great. So Cheltenham means so much to me. It really does. And I was thrilled to be part of it. I mean, especially as I'd been second in 2 Cheltenham Gold Cups, Soothsayer, an American horse, and Pendle. I'd won a lot of good races. Pendle won the Arkle. Lanzarote won the Champion Hurdle. Saloning won something or other. Soothsayer won the Cathcart. Killiney, great horse, had won what used to be the RSA, the Novices Gold Cup. This year, sponsored, funny enough, by a pal of mine, or 2 pals of mine, Americans, who I buy horses for. It'll be called the Brown Advisory, and they're an investment firm. But, like the Sweps and the Hennessy and everything else, we old hacks go on calling it by the previous name from 30 years ago. Excuse me. So, yeah, to go back was great, but not to be allowed into the changing room, I mean, John Frankham, brave as a lion, he'd go marching in there after he retired, and nobody'd be bold enough to chuck him out. But I got thrown out of there several times. But it was so exciting. I love it. And also, Stephen, of course, my son Mark was riding. So that was an added bonus. And to see him, he was second on Toby Tobias in the Gold Cup, behind Cyril Griffith's horse, Norton's Coin. And the owner wasn't happy at all. I thought he gave the most perfect ride. He was a better jockey than me. And then he won the Gold Cup on Garrison Savannah. And the BBC had upgraded their accommodation by then, and I had a little tomato house in the standings of the winner's enclosure. Julian had the main little tomato house to do his bit. And my son Mark won on Garrison Savannah, beating French horse, the fellow, I suppose. Yeah. And he came into that hallowed winner's enclosure packed. They've done such a good thing because, I mean, so many thousands, tens of thousands can see it. And he came into that winner's enclosure and he looked up to my pod like that and he went, and I interpreted at the time, he was saying, yeah, I've done something you couldn't do. But he said, no, Dad, I was just saying, isn't this great? You know, the emotion is such a marvellous thing. Oh, and I remember being live on air shortly before that, another Cheltenham race, but not that particular one. And the great Edward Gillespie, who was there as the general manager for 37 years, was boldly trying to stop the hordes following the winner of whatever race it was into that hallowed area. And he got hold of one man and he was not going to let him past. No, but 50, 60 others went round them while they were grappling. So it didn't really work. So all these little things you come back. And silly things you see when you're in your... Aren't we privileged to be in our little pods, you know, when everyone else is elbowing each other? I saw Philippa Kindersley coming across the paddock, down the length of the paddock, on a wavy sort of trajectory. And she was coming to me for an interview about whatever cause she was on at the time. And when she got to me, she said, all right, Philippa. She said, yes, I've just weighed myself. It was something to do with... I suppose she wanted to look good anyway. Apparently she'd taken some Lasix, which jockeys used to take, and they're now banned, you see. And so I said, okay, yeah, fine. So the producer says, 3 seconds to live, Richard. Dun, 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 dun. I said, I'm glad to be joined by Philip Kindersley, who I must say has taken a rather strange trajectory to a footpath to get to me, but I'm sure she's well. She's doing this for charity. And I turned and I said, how are you, Philip? And she went, couldn't speak. She was so dehydrated from taking the pee pills. So a marvellous girl. So you've got to think on your feet in those situations. And I turned back to the camera and said, I'm sure Philippa will be back with us in a few minutes, you know, gave some bit of news, you see. And turned back to her a few minutes later and said, Philippa, you've rejoined us. That's good. What do you think of it? Boom, boom, boom. Couldn't speak again. And she was distraught, absolutely, because she's the most marvellous wife of the late Gay Kindersley, you know, a marvellous person. But I'm sure she wouldn't mind me telling you. But you see these little things that you don't see if you're a race goer. I mean, one other thing on that score. When Dawn Run won her Gold Cup, and remember she'd won her champion hurdle, great big mare. John Joe Neal rode her, controversially getting the ride from Tony Mullins, who'd won the champion hurdle. And there was a big contingent of fans, and the place was packed, the winner's enclosure. And little Mrs. Charmin Hill, who owned the horse, Dawn Run, was in there, and I could just see the top of her hat. And I thought this would be fun because there was a big pal of hers from Barbados, the whole crowd from Ireland. And sure enough, as John Joe got off and disappeared amongst the bodies and off he went, they got hold of Mrs. Hill, who was only about 6'7", and kept throwing her high in the air. I mean, 10 feet in the air. And by which time, we had moved on to get the results from Catterick or somewhere. You know, they missed a great bit of television. But in these little pods, we could see everything was happening and were protected, you know, from the mayhem of the race. But again, to see those great horses, I mean, fantastic, wasn't it? I mean, Desi wasn't a Cheltenham horse, but he won his Gold Cup in ground he didn't like, heavy ground. Simon Sherwood on board, and lots of good jocks have ridden him, and I know what a thrill it must have been. But so many good horses year after year. And what's going to happen this year? I mean, there are so many good horses.
And how much did the job change over the years? Because 1997, we've got Julian and Peter O'Sullivan leaving and Clare coming in. How much did the job change?
Dramatically, but it had to. Not for P. O'Sullivan, but here I'm telling tales out of school, but they had already contracted Jim McGrath to join the team for when Peter retired. So he was on contract. And head of sport came up to me, Jonathan Martin, and he said to me one day, Richard, you get on well with Peter. Could you, see, when does he think he'll retire? So I trotted along. Peter, when do you think you'll retire? Oh, when I've done 50 years commentating. That was another 10 years. I went back to Jonathan Martin. Oh, my God. So anyway, I mean, great to have Peter. Of course, he was the voice of racing, but they got this other plan. And Julian, who was so professional and really got racing. No one was interested, particularly at the BBC. Jonathan Martin's quite a good racehorse owner now, but it was a football era. And so Julian was given a position that very few television presenters have. He got his own office and he started doing contracts and he decided everything. He was king. But it had got boring, Stephen. He wouldn't move out of his own comfort zone of his own camera position, whereas now they're everywhere. I mean, Luke Harvey's jumping out of starting stalls. Matt Chapman jumps over the rails into the bookmakers. But Julian wouldn't move, and they realised we had to move with the times. And so Clare did an interview at Newbury when she was a kid, just left college, or perhaps she was at college, and was so good, and they offered her a job, and she turned it down. And I spoke to her afterwards. She said, look, Richard, I can see you're in your little box. So-and-so's there. I don't want to be in a little box. I want to flourish, and turn the job down. Now, that was very, very bold for a young girl. Anyway, she joined Radio 5 Live, went everywhere, did the Olympics. Then she had some muscle. And they asked her back a few years later with a specific reason of altering the dimensions, instead of Julian being very professional, very good. I mean, Julian knew the job inside out, presented it, but things had changed. Not all our readers are the Telegraph, Times, Guardian. A lot of people read the Mail and the Sun, Express. So Clare was brought in really to break the mold, and Julian, a very educated man and a very knowledgeable man, when his next contract came up, he could see that the winds of change were getting pretty strong, and he didn't renew his contract, it was inevitable that it was going to change. But Clare was brilliant, and you don't get to where Clare's got, or Peter O'Sullivan, by just doing as you're told and rolling over. If something didn't, she'd agree with her, she'd make sure that a discussion was had. And I love Clare to bits. Absolutely, what she's done has been marvellous, and she knew her sport inside out. And I was a boy, a bit player. That was all. Occasional interviewer, occasional presenter when people weren't well, or when they wanted to go on holidays. So I knew my position, and I had no great ambition to do anything other than I just loved it. Just enjoyed it. But to work with Clare, the meetings were very, very good under Clare as the main presenter. Whereas we didn't often have them in Julian's time because he liked to rule, you see. And it all changed because, and again, I shouldn't say these things, but I will because they're true. When I was presenting, I used to do it every 3 months when Julian went to Barbados and then South Africa in the winter. And when nothing much was happening, like this January and a bit of February, a lot of weather interruptions. So I'd be fairly cheeky. And a horse called Mr. Grumpy was running, and I'd say, oh, this horse was named after Julian. The owners liked Julian, Mr. Grumpy. That is a silly thing. And then when he got back, he wrote me a letter. CC, the head of sport, And it was after Timeform, who was sponsoring the first day of the season down at Chepstow, launched things. And Julian wrote to me and said, I'm very disappointed in you, Richard. You know, you mentioned Timeform at least 60 times. We were only meant to mention a sponsor twice, at least 60 times. I think it's disgraceful. And to think that you could be bought for the price of a black book, which was the black book came out every week, I suppose, I don't know. And I never used Timeform. Skew used to use it a fair bit, and Peter O'Sullivan a lot. They went back on the tapes to listen, you see. They wanted to assert, I said it again, you see. And apparently Peter said, and they're off for the Timeform hurdle. It commemorates the newest edition of the Timeform annual. It's 500 pages long. It's got 300 essays. Pictures, absolutely amazing. And of course, the producer is shouting in Peter's ear, Peter, they're off, they're off. No. And they're coming to the second hurdle. It was just one of those magic moments. So I wrote back and said, look, this epitomizes everything's wrong with the BBC. We never have any meetings. We turn up, we each do our own job, and we go home. And I said, it's a weakness on your part, Julian, that you feel you had to write me a letter and not ring me up and say, Pitman, I think you mentioned Timeform. And I said, I never mentioned them. You know, it could have been so easily done. But that told you what the racing was like then. So after that, we had meetings the day of the race, the morning of the race, and before it to get things going. We had more input, and that's what happened when Clare joined.
And of course, BBC kept losing race courses and finished, as you said, in 2012. That must have been a sad day when you finished on the BBC.
Yes, it was. It was inevitable, I suppose, because of money. You know, I mean, Sky coming up could buy things, and other Channel 4, and then ITV saw that it was a great opening. You know, the Grand National is such a huge thing, and we had great racing, Cheltenham, other things, you know. It fitted in with their current racing. It was money in the end. And, you know, I think the number could be incorrect, but I think it's something like 54 miles of cables have to be put in up at Aintree to run the thing, or some huge amount. And over 50 cameras. You know, it's a big, expensive operation. But we are, I say we are not in it, obviously, the BBC, the nation's broadcasters, you know, and we couldn't afford it. So we lost it in one fell swoop. Having been 35 years in it, it was quite a blow. But, you know, I've been involved ever since, one way or another, you know, either doing jobs for Aintree on the Day and Aintree TV and with the virtual Grand National. I mean, what a success that was.
Yeah, you've had a few more rides with the virtual Grand National. Yeah. You're still not winning.
Yeah,
but,
never winning. And Chris keeps going further and further back. Yeah. But, you know, so one way and another, I've been involved since 1967 when I rode Foynaven's year and fell at the third, which was awful because you just want the race to stop. You know, hang on, boys, I've fallen, let's start again. No, that's not the way it works. So since 67 to now, and I'm involved with Nick Luck and ITV again doing the virtual race this year, providing we actually get it, which we hopefully will with punters, you know. It'll go out on the Friday night, whereas last year it was actually at national time. And, you know, it got a viewership of 4.8 million people, which was huge.
Watching the virtual, yeah.
Can I just say on that, Stephen, sorry, I keep butting in, but I'm old.
No, it's gold stuff, this.
During my time, the biggest audience we had was 16.9 million people. That's huge. Oh, tremendous. You know, the race does grab people.
Now, looking forward to Cheltenham, which is only, by the time this recording goes out, less than 4 weeks away. How do you think it will be like without any crowds this year?
Do we know that's the way it's going to be?
Well, not yet, no, but
I think
quiet, obviously.
Yeah, it'll be quiet. Yeah, it'll be quiet. I was there last year, all 4 days, and in fact, the day before for lunch, but that's irrelevant. So it'll be very different for me. But the way the cameras work, and they put crowd noises on, so I suppose we go. But it's building up to be so exciting. I mean, it's tremendous. Now, people keep asking for tips and what do you think? A month away, Stephen, how can we evaluate it? Because the ground is so important, absolutely rules. The next thing is health of stables. Look where we're at this moment. Colin Tizard's had a terrible season. They've been wrong. Just coming back now. Had a winner last week, a good winner. Other trainers are the same. Harry Whittington, who only had 3 runners last Cheltenham, first, second and third, only just again won with a horse called Mrs. Nash the other day, named after his grandmother, I suppose. Yeah. So trainers coming back. The week before, that for me is the time we evaluate who's healthy and who's not. I'm involved through Americans we buy for with Willie Mullins, which is very excited, might have a couple of runners, but also Ben Pauling. We've got a couple there. One runs today, 5 o'clock. Anyway, that's irrelevant. It's called Gardino, lovely horse. Ben had a quiet time until recently. Now he's had 28 winners. It is the health of the stables, that makes all the difference. Look at Mullins. He's fielding winner after winner.
On that, Alboom Photo, who has only had 1 run this season, why is it that back in your day, perhaps that's a long while ago now, but I was looking at like Pendle and the Dickler, the year that they clashed in the 73 Gold Cup, they both ran 6 times each that year.
Yeah.
Gold Cup runners now don't tend to run anywhere near as often.
No, I think there's specific horses, though. It's horses for courses. I mean, the other one is Best Mate, of course. And look at the stick Henrietta Knight got for running him 2 or 3 times for each Gold Cup. But it worked. She won 3 Gold Cups. Alboom Photo, obviously, we don't know him. He might be a very finicky eater. He might take 2 months or a month, 6 weeks, a month to get over a race. And as you know now, trainers don't run fat horses anymore needing a race. When do they need a race? Their facilities are so good. They don't need races. That's where Martin Pike was brilliant. His horses were fit as rabbits, when lots of people, I was riding at the time, you'd ride a lot of fat horses where the race would bring them on. So it's all changed. You don't get horses needing races anymore. The whole thing is geared up to go.
Well, thank you again for those thoughts about Cheltenham, and thank you for being on the Paddock and the Pavilion. You very kindly agreed to come on again, where I'm going to ask listeners to send in questions direct to me, and then we'll have a programme where we'll go through those questions about the Grand National.
Yeah, good idea. And I'm just looking actually at myself now, not a pretty face, never was. But you see the scar on my face there. Lots of people think it's a nice little dimple. That is where 3 teeth were pulled out. Look, that's where your teeth are. And they were pulled out there with tweezers, horse's foot pushed the whole lot up through there. Now, when you're young and you're having a dimple put in your face by a horse's foot, and also you can see from my cheeks they're odd, the whole bush has been, the whole has altered my face continually. It was never any good, but anyway, we are what we are.
Well, you're still here and you're still on good form today, and thank you again for being with me.
Right, Stephen, thank you. And just give us a call and we'll be here.
Good. Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to The Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Pad and Pav.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Don't forget that your skin is your largest organ, and the sun can be your skin's worst enemy. Dermatologist recommended Neutrogena products offer the ultimate protection for your skin. From makeup remover wipes to Hydro Boost Water Gel Facial Moisturizer, BJ's has your entire lineup of Neutrogena skincare products. And now through December 3rd, save $4 on any Neutrogena product at BJ's. Love your skin back and save now through December 3rd, only at BJ's.